Welcome back to the Fire Traveler. Tonight, I must warn you, the knowledge I'm about to share is not for the faint of heart. Some stories educate, others entertain, but this one could change how you see the very nature of divine power and mortal ambition. The chronicle I'm about to share unfolds in chambers warded by centuries of protective magic, where a silver dragon in human form guards knowledge that could unmake the world. It is a tale not of adventure, but of understanding. A deep exploration of 5 artifacts whose individual power pales beside their collective purpose, whose very existence threatens the fundamental nature of reality itself. So prepare yourself for education wrapped in dread, dear friend, as I share the legend of Dragon Masks, a story of divine fragments masquerading as mere artifacts, of consciousness that corrupts from within, and of the terrible truth that sometimes the most dangerous knowledge is the knowledge we most desperately need to possess. In the deepest vaults beneath the great library of Candlekeep, where even the most senior scholars rarely ventured, Curator Miriam maintained a collection that few people knew existed. The chamber of dangerous artifacts was warded by spells that had been layered and reinforced by generations of the most powerful mages in Faerun, each enchantment designed to contain objects whose very presence posed a threat to the stability of reality itself. Tonight, the silver dragon who had spent the last 2 centuries in human form sat before a specially constructed display case, her ancient eyes reflecting the soft light of ever-burning candles as she studied the most dangerous artifacts in her care. Before her, arranged in a precise pentagonal pattern, lay detailed manuscripts describing 5 objects that could reshape the world if they were ever brought together. The legendary dragon masks of Tiamat.
"Tell me again why you believe this research is necessary,"
said the figure seated across from her, Sindra Sylvain, a Harper agent whose expertise in draconic lore had earned her access to materials that most people would never be allowed to see. The middle-aged human woman had spent weeks preparing for this briefing, gathering information from sources across the continent, but she understood that theoretical knowledge was no substitute for the kind of deep understanding that could only come from someone who had lived through the ages when these artifacts were actively shaping history. Miriam's human disguise was carefully crafted, but not perfect. Her eyes held depths that spoke of centuries of accumulated wisdom, and her movements had the fluid grace that marked her true nature to those who knew what to look for. She had maintained this form for so long that it had become natural to her, but the subject they were discussing brought out aspects of her dragon nature that no spell could completely conceal. Because knowledge of these artifacts is fragmentary and often contradictory, the curator replied, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had personally witnessed events that others only knew through legend. The common understanding is that they are simply powerful magical items created by Tiamat's followers. The truth is far more complex and far more dangerous. She gestured toward the first manuscript, its pages covered with intricate diagrams and text written in multiple ancient languages. The dragon masks are not mere artifacts. They are fragments of Tiamat herself, pieces of her divine essence that was separated from her when she was bound in the 9 hells. Each mask contains not just magical power, but a portion of the Dragon Queen's consciousness, her memories, her personality, and her accumulated wisdom. Sindra leaned forward, her scholarly instincts immediately grasping the implications.
Then wearing one would be like allowing Tiamat partial possession of your mind and body.
More than that, it would be like becoming a willing vessel for one aspect of her nature, while remaining conscious enough to believe that the thoughts and desires flowing through you are your own. Miriam's expression showed the kind of deep concern that came from understanding the true scope of the threat they were discussing. The curator opened the manuscript to reveal a detailed illustration of the first mask, a creation of black dragon scale that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Even rendered in ink and pigment, the image conveyed a sense of malevolent intelligence, as if the artifact was somehow aware of being observed. The black dragon mask, Miriam began, embodies Tiamat's aspect of corruption and decay. It was the first to be created, forged during the earliest days of her banishment, when her rage at being separated from the material plane was at its peak. The mask grants its wearer power over acid and poison, the ability to corrupt both living things and inanimate objects, and most dangerous of all, the capacity to spread spiritual contamination that can turn allies into enemies and friends into betrayers. She pointed to specific details in the illustration, tiny runes carved into the mask's surface that seemed to shift and move when viewed directly. These markings are not decorative. They are a complex magical matrix that allows the mask to interface directly with the wearer's mind, gradually overwriting their personality with aspects of Tiamat's own nature. The process is subtle and progressive, so that the victim rarely realizes what is happening until it is far too late.
How long does the corruption take?
Sindra asked, making detailed notes in her own journal. That depends on the strength of will of the wearer and the circumstances under which they claim the mask. A person who puts it on willingly, seeking power for selfish purposes, might be completely dominated within days. Someone who wears it reluctantly, for noble purposes, might resist for months or even years, but eventually all wearers succumb. The mask is patient, and Tiamat has had millennia to perfect her psychological manipulation techniques. The curator turned to the next illustration, this one showing a mask crafted from white dragon scale that gleamed like fresh snow. Unlike the black mask, this artifact seemed to radiate light and cold, its surface covered with frost patterns that were beautiful and terrible in equal measure. The white dragon mask represents Tiamat's aspect of cruel indifference and merciless logic. It grants power over ice and cold, but more importantly, it strips away emotional responses that the Dragon Queen considers weaknesses. Compassion, empathy, the ability to form genuine bonds with others. Wearers become incredibly intelligent and tactically brilliant, but they lose the capacity to understand why others might object to their methods.
A perfect strategist, without moral constraints,
Sindra observed. Precisely. The white mask has historically been worn by some of Tiamat's most effective servants, precisely because they retained enough of their original personality to pass for normal, while becoming absolutely ruthless in pursuit of their goals. They can maintain friendships and alliances for decades, all while planning betrayals and manipulations that would horrify their associates if they were discovered. The third illustration showed a mask of blue dragon scale that crackled with barely contained electrical energy. The artwork captured the sense of a storm contained within a delicate shell, power that could be unleashed at a moment's notice to devastating effect. The blue dragon mask embodies Tiamat's pride and her hunger for dominance. It is perhaps the most overtly powerful of the five, granting control over lightning and thunder, the ability to fly without wings, and command over weather patterns within a significant radius. But its true danger lies in how it amplifies the wearer's ego and ambition. Miriam's expression grew thoughtful as she considered how to explain the subtle dangers that made this particular mask so treacherous. Pride is often considered the root of all other evils, and the blue mask makes it impossible for its wearer to accept that they might be wrong about anything. They become convinced of their own infallibility, unable to learn from mistakes or accept advice from others. This makes them incredibly dangerous leaders, because they will pursue disastrous courses of action with absolute certainty in their correctness. The fourth mask was created from green dragon scale, its surface seeming to writhe with poison green veins that pulsed like a living heart. The illustration captured an artifact that appeared almost organic, as if it had grown rather than been crafted by any conventional means. The green dragon mask represents Tiamat's gift for deception and manipulation. It grants power over poison and disease, but its true strength lies in its ability to enhance the wearer's natural charisma and social skills to supernatural levels. They become incredibly persuasive, able to convince others to act against their own interests, with nothing more than carefully chosen words.
Mental domination,
Syndra said. More subtle than that, and therefore more dangerous. Traditional mental domination leaves traces. The victim knows they have been controlled, and they resent it once the effect wears off. The green mask works by making people genuinely believe that the wearer's suggestions are their own ideas. The corruption spreads through social networks like a plague, turning entire communities into willing servants without them ever realizing what has happened. The final illustration showed the red dragon mask, crafted from scales that seemed to burn with inner fire. Even the artwork conveyed a sense of barely restrained violence, of destructive forces held in check by the thinnest of barriers. The red dragon mask embodies pure destructive fury, Tiamat's rage at being banished from the material plane, concentrated into physical form. It grants power over fire and heat, but more importantly, it removes all restraints on the wearer's aggressive impulses. They become living engines of destruction, unable to resolve conflicts through anything other than violence.
That sounds like it would make the wearer easy to predict and counter,
Syndra observed. You might think so, but the opposite is true. The mask doesn't make its wearer mindlessly violent. It makes them brilliantly, creatively violent. They become tactical geniuses when it comes to warfare and destruction, able to identify weaknesses and exploit them with devastating efficiency. Combined with the supernatural charisma that all the masks provide, they often become war leaders whose followers would die willingly for the chance to participate in glorious battles. Miriam closed the manuscript and sat back in her chair, the weight of centuries showing in her expression. Individually, each mask is dangerous enough to threaten entire kingdoms, but their true purpose becomes clear only when you understand how they work together. They are not 5 separate artifacts. They are 5 aspects of a single greater entity, fragments of Tiamat's consciousness that yearn to be reunited.
What happens if all 5 masks are brought together?
According to the most reliable accounts, they would merge into a single artifact of almost godlike power, the crown of Tiamat, which would allow its wearer to channel the full essence of the Dragon Queen herself. But even that is not the ultimate goal of the cult's current plans. The curator reached for another manuscript, this one bound in scales that seemed to shift color in the candlelight. The masks are designed to serve as anchoring points for Tiamat's consciousness in the material plane. If the proper rituals are performed with all 5 masks present, they would create a permanent link between the Dragon Queen's prison in the 9 Hells and our reality, allowing her to manifest her full power without actually leaving her current prison.
She could rule both realms simultaneously,
Syndra realized, and eventually merge them into a single reality that combines the worst aspects of both. The material plane would retain its physical laws and resources, but it would be overlaid with the hellish nature of the 9 Hells, a world where evil is not just permitted but actively encouraged by the fundamental forces of reality itself. The implications were staggering, and Syndra found herself struggling to imagine what life would be like in such a reality.
How close are the cult's current efforts to achieving this goal?
Closer than most people realize, but not as close as they themselves believe. Miriam's expression showed the kind of complex calculation that came from centuries of observing the long-term patterns of history. They have recovered at least 3 of the 5 masks, possibly 4, but more importantly, they have developed the magical and organizational infrastructure necessary to perform the binding ritual.
What would be required to stop them?
Ideally, the masks should be separated and hidden where the cult cannot recover them. But that may no longer be possible, given how much progress they have already made. The alternative would be to destroy the masks entirely, but that carries its own risks.
Such as?
Each mask contains a fragment of divine essence. Destroying one would release that essence back into the world as raw, uncontrolled magical energy. The resulting explosion would likely devastate everything within 100 miles of the destruction point. Destroying all 5 simultaneously, the magical release might be sufficient to tear holes in reality itself. Syndra set down her quill and leaned back in her chair, trying to process the magnitude of the challenge that lay ahead. Every potential solution seemed to carry risks that were almost as dangerous as the problem they were trying to solve.
Is there any way to neutralize the masks without destroying them?
There are theoretical possibilities, Miriam admitted. Ancient texts speak of rituals that could separate the divine essence from the physical artifacts, returning Tiamat's consciousness to the 9 Hells while leaving behind ordinary, though still powerful, magical items. But such rituals would require resources and expertise that may no longer exist in the current age.
What kind of resources?
At minimum, you would need the active cooperation of at least one other deity, someone with sufficient power to contain and redirect divine essence. You would need ritual sites that had been prepared with the kind of protective enchantments that were used in the earliest days of magic, when gods and mortals worked together more directly. And you would need practitioners whose understanding of magical theory goes far beyond what is commonly taught in modern schools of magic. The curator gestured toward the manuscripts spread across the table, their pages filled with knowledge that represented centuries of accumulated research and analysis. Most importantly, you would need time, months or years to prepare properly for such an undertaking, and time is the one resource that appears to be in shortest supply.
How long do we have?
Based on the intelligence reports I have been receiving, the cult is accelerating their timeline. They seem to believe that they can complete their great ritual within the next few months, possibly weeks. Whether this confidence is justified or whether they are being driven by desperation, I cannot say. But the window of opportunity for preventing their success is closing rapidly. Sindra gathered her notes and prepared to leave, her mind already racing with plans for disseminating this crucial intelligence to the various organizations that were working to counter the cult's threat. But as she reached the door of the chamber, she paused and looked back at the ancient dragon, who had dedicated so much of her life to preserving dangerous knowledge for future generations.
"Curator Miriam,"
she said,
"may I ask why you have chosen to help us? You could remain here in safety, protected by Candlekeep's wards and neutrality. Why risk involvement in what may prove to be a losing battle?"
The silver dragon's human disguise flickered for just a moment, revealing glimpses of her true nature. Ancient eyes that had witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, scales that gleamed like polished mirrors, the bearing of a creature whose wisdom had been earned through millennia of experience. "Because," she said simply, "some knowledge is too dangerous to remain purely theoretical. The dragon masks represent not just a threat to the current world order, but to the fundamental nature of reality itself. If Tiamat succeeds in her current plans, there will be no libraries to preserve knowledge, no scholars to seek understanding, no future generations to benefit from the wisdom of the past." She gestured toward the manuscripts that contained so much carefully preserved lore. "All of this, every book, every scroll, every carefully catalogued artifact exists because people throughout history have been willing to take risks to preserve what matters. If we are not willing to act on the knowledge we have preserved, then we have failed in our most fundamental responsibility." As Sindra made her way back through the labyrinthine corridors of Candlekeep, she carried with her not just detailed intelligence about the cult's ultimate weapons, but a deeper understanding of what was truly at stake in the struggle ahead. The dragon masks were more than mere artifacts of power. They were keys that could unlock a future too terrible to contemplate. Weapons that could reshape reality itself according to the will of the most evil deity ever to threaten the material plane. The battle for the fate of the world would be fought not just with swords and spells, but with knowledge and understanding. With the wisdom to see beyond immediate threats to the deeper patterns that shaped the course of history itself. And at the center of that battle would be 5 artifacts whose legendary power was matched only by the legendary evil they served. The night was dark as the Harper agent began her journey back to the world beyond Candlekeep's walls. But she carried with her the light of knowledge that might yet prove sufficient to hold back the darkness that threatened to consume everything. And so, this tale draws to a close. Though its echoes may linger in your dreams, the fire burns lower now. But don't despair, I've countless more stories waiting to be shared with you. If this tale stirred something within you, if it reminded you why magic still matters in this mundane world, then please, light your own beacon. That glowing thumbs up tells the spirits of story that our fellowship grows stronger. Subscribe to join our circle permanently and ring that notification bell. That way, you'll know the moment I return with new chronicles. The fire burns brightest when more souls gather around it. Wouldn't you agree? Now, if that's the case, share this tale with another weary soul who needs it, reminding them adventure still exists. Tag a friend who would appreciate a good story by the fire. The more who believe, the more real these worlds become. And if you are new to our hearth, explore the playlist of chronicles that I have gathered. Tales of heroes and villains, love and loss, magic and mystery. Each one carefully chosen for souls like yours. Until the fire calls us together again, may your own adventures be worthy of legend. And may you never lose the wonder that brought you here tonight. Travel or sleep well, brave soul. The long rest awaits your return.